Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's program about the issues facing the 2024 legislature and the candidates who may be working on those issues. This session is being recorded, and the live transcription will be enabled shortly. If you have any questions for our panelists at any point during the talk, please put them in the Q&A function. If you're using a mobile device, the Q&A function may be at the top right-hand corner of your screen. The library is always delighted to welcome policy analyst and former director of the New Jersey project at Rutgers Eagleton Institute of Politics, Ingrid Reed. Reed is also the founder of the startup New Jersey Spotlight, a civic journalism website designed to provide coverage of current state issues important to its communities. Her full CV would likely take the hour. Suffice it to say,
no, let's stop.
No, I use it. She has been a long-time advocate and supporter for many things, to include the wish to, for people to have the knowledge they need to cast their vote, which is why we're here this evening. Please join me in welcoming Ingrid Reed, who will introduce her fellow panelists.
Right. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be talking to you on a really gray, sort of messy evening. And to say we're going to be talking about the 16th legislative district. Now, I don't expect all of you to jump up and say, I know exactly what that is, because that's a complication in New Jersey. But you do know on November 7th, which is election day, that you will be voting also for local municipal offices and county offices. And you don't have to worry about them because they all have geographic boundaries and they never change. But the legislature, which is really, really important in New Jersey, can change, and we'll be getting into that. But we're going to focus on the 16th legislative district. Charles Stile, the investigative reporter that we have joining us tonight, is a person who votes in the 16th legislative district because that's Princeton's district. Jeannine LaRue is an observer of the 16th district and all the other 39 districts in New Jersey because she really knows her stuff. And I actually hope she'll tell us a little something about the role of women in this legislative election and basically in New Jersey, because we were doing really well with close to 30%, but it doesn't look so good. So, but I know that you live right nearby and you probably have thoughts about the 16th legislative district as well. Kim, you have a special slide that we prepared that has photographs of the candidates and a little bio paragraph, which people can read later or they can read now. Could you put that up? Kim?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
I thought that would be interesting because all people now know about these candidates is something like this, the ballot, and people open it up and they say, who are these people? Well, we want to answer that question. Okay, here they are. Charlie and Jeannine, I think you probably would recognize a good number of these people, but not all of them. And so in this election, we are asked to vote for members of the Senate, one from each district, and this is the 16th district, and two that are for every district has two people that are for the General Assembly. And in this case, we have a libertarian also on the ballot. So it's been a little hard to get information about all of these candidates, but we'll let that go for another little while once we just go through this. So two people are running for re-election. That is Andrew Zwicker and Roy Fryman, who are already in the legislature. Andrew as a senator and Roy as an assembly person. And then we have two new people well, actually three. On the Republican side, Michael Pappas is running for Senate, And then two new people are who have not had as much experience as he has are running for the two assembly seats. One from the northern part of the district and goes up to Clinton, which is pretty far away from here. But Grace Zhang is from Princeton and would have been voting in the 16th district. And she probably will, running for the assembly. So, Jeannine, what do you make about this group of people? We have Michelle Drulis taking the place of Sanda Jaffer, who only served for, I think, for one term, but she's very politically connected. Charlie or Jeannine, would you like to say something about these candidates who are running? What would you say about Michael Pappas, because he's sort of experienced as a Republican from the Somerset County area?
I'm going to on this particular question, I'm going to defer to Charlie first, since he actually will be making a decision at the polls on the candidates. And then I do want to say something overall, how these folks fit into the larger scheme of things.
Good. Great. Okay.
Michael Pappas, some might remember, was actually a member of Congress for one term in the 1990s. And he distinguished himself by joining a group of congressmen who liked to sing in a barbershop quartet style of singing. And this was he was in Congress at the height of the whole Kenneth Starr investigation into Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky and Whitewater. And Kenneth Starr was an immensely unpopular figure in New Jersey. Anyway, Michael Pappas joined this quartet to sing a version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in praise of Kenneth Starr on the floor of the House, and praising him, Twinkle, Twinkle, Kenneth Starr. I don't remember the lyrics. I don't have it in front of me. But the Democrats heard this tape, put it on, we didn't have social media back then, but it was on every advertisement on the radio, and it was really devastating. And this led to the election of Rush Holt, who went on to stay for many terms after that. So he hasn't really been that active in politics since then. He's made some other attempts in public office. He's the township administrator of Bridgewater. He does have a strong conservative or deeply conservative background. And so he's trying to make a comeback against Andrew Zwicker. Andrew, as you know, is a scientist who's been in the legislature now for more than a decade, I believe, from the Assembly and now the Senate. And he's kind of an interesting character. I mean, character's not an interesting figure in that he represents the more liberal, socially progressive Princeton, but also some of the more suburban concerns of the other towns around us. So, and I live in Princeton, so that's when I say us, I mean us here as residents. And he's also kind of wedged in between sort of the political machinery of Central Jersey and Middlesex. And he felt a lot of pressure earlier on his campaign or in his career from South Jersey under the leadership of George Norcross. So he's been able to navigate that kind of pressure zone. The South Jersey influence has abated somewhat in the last couple election cycles. That's been long described. So he's one that'll be interesting to watch. Roy Fryman has been a kind of a
Charlie,
quiet.
can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
This is an interesting race because
Yeah.
Michael Pappas and Andrew Zwicker faced each other
Last time.
in the last election,
you.
and Zwicker won by a very narrow margin of something
Correct.
like 80 votes. And so it will be interesting to see. And in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
Zwicker embraced, I guess you'd call it the Murphy
Agenda.
especially in the energy area, which seems to be not popular with the Republicans in
Correct.
the legislature. So
Right.
we'll see how.
The other, well, you're right about that, but also that was the district, though, I think has gotten a little more more democratic, though, in the redistricting. And you can correct me if
has.
I'm wrong. It's a little more advantageous for him,
Mhm.
but I'm not so sure, with some of these, and I'm sure we'll get into this whole issue of some of the
Right.
things you just touched on, the Murphy agenda and some of the social culture war issues that have been roiling,
Mhm.
whether that's offset it in any way,
Right. I
especially in a
think
low turnout election.
Charlie,
Yeah.
if I could just add with that before you
Yeah,
go
go
through the
ahead.
other candidates, because I think it's really important what you just said about, well, both what you and Ingrid said. It was a very, very competitive race the last time around for Andrew Zwicker.
Yeah.
And then every 10 years, as we know, and I don't know if our viewers realize, every 10 years, the legislative districts are discussed and often redrawn. And it's a give or take with partisan politics. So Andrew's district really was redistricting a little bit more in favor of the Democrats.
Mhm.
There are a couple of districts that were that the Democrats, I think they just kind of made a decision they would let it be less competitive. But Andrew, he does have, as far as the number of voters, Democratic voters, and the way people are leaning more to the left, he does have a little bit of an edge. But I do want to talk about, after we get through the
Yeah,
candidates, about
he
what the whole picture looks like.
he does have a little bit of an edge. I would also note that, I don't know if this is getting too far afield, Ingrid. You can just reel me in at any time.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a buzzer you got on your desk. You just hit it, I'll hear it.
Okay.
But the 2 years ago, that was a backlash election against Democrats. There was a lot of anger nationally. I think Phil Murphy was one of the few Democrats who hung on, who were on the ballot in 2021 nationally. And that was a post-pandemic election. There was still a lot of festering anger over the pandemic and how it was executed by Democratic leadership. So that has abated somewhat, but again, we have a new round of sort of hot button wedge issues that are kind of on the table. So it's really, I don't have any internal polling to point to, but it's really going to be a big, fascinating question mark as to how much those issues are going to offset any advantage Zwicker might have.
Right. The new district had 4 towns in Hunterdon County added to it.
Right.
So it's hard to know what that will be. We have a question that came up on the screen. I think let's just do this quickly. A senator is elected for 4 years. An assembly person is elected for 2 years, and it's like the People's House, very much like our Senate and Congress in the national federal government. So, and the Senate has some special responsibilities that I think make them quite powerful in terms of their responsibility to review and vote up or down on appointments that the governor has to make. And so, but it takes the vote of both houses to pass a bill, and both houses have committees that study those bills. And so it doesn't, it's not as though one has that much more power, but it's just a way of people, when they set this thing up, of making it fairer in terms of where candidates could come from and represent us. So,
Well, I'd
Also-
like to follow up on that for a second, though, because
Yeah.
there's a little bit more to the years.
Yes,
that's right.
The,
Yes.
the
Mhm.
viewers need to understand that the reason all 120 legislators are up this year is because of redistricting. When the
Right.
last time the legislature ran, everybody only got elected for a 2-year term.
Right.
Now, this time, the senators will be elected for a 4-year term,
Right.
and the assembly people, again, will be elected only for 2-year terms.
Thank
So
you. Yeah.
that does happen every 10 years.
Right.
right. The last time was 2011. And by the way, the turnout then was 27% of the electorate. But it should be
Exactly.
noted, there's a million more, 1.1. I don't have, I did this the other day. I think it's about 1.1 more voters on the rolls than there were a decade ago. So that's adding another kind of element of volatility to this.
Right. And unlike maybe 20 years ago, more people affiliate with one party or the other. So there are fewer people who are called unaffiliated.
Right.
And probably people do studies and try to figure out how unaffiliated people is not those people who haven't voted in a primary. But I think it's interesting that at one time, New Jersey was half unaffiliated and then half associated with one party or the other, usually a 5% more Democratic. So that's shifted. And also, we don't know about turnout this year. We'll get back to that on another issue that's before us. I'm going to, let's see, Kim, can you just move up these photographs so people can see that we have put a paragraph about each one so that they could go after this show and go on the library website and read about the people who are here. I guess
I'll send them.
Okay.
So we have, sorry, we have in the, something I can send out is we have sort of contact information, little biographies based on what they sent for each of the candidates.
And I should say that we're indebted to the library staff for getting all of this information. You might be interested to know that it's not easy to be a voter in New Jersey. The New Jersey Spotlight contacted many times every single one of the 240 candidates, if you put them all together, and 83 of them responded.
Terrible.
So it's not easy to get information about candidates.
It's an atrocity, really. I mean,
we don't have a voter guide, and
I think that's if I could add, I think that it's really a disgrace that the candidates don't respond. They don't feel compelled to because of the diminished press corps and the diminished press, and they feel that since there's no pressure really to do it, since there's an absence, there's no upside in sharing that information, because the only thing that they see it, any kind of nominal disclosure, basic disclosure, is seen as put as a potential risk or exposing yourself to an attack of some ridiculous thing. It's just they don't answer questionnaires, they don't answer basic requests like that, and they don't debate, which is another thing. The debates have dropped off precipitously. It's really become undemocratic.
When I was at Eagleton and we did a lot of work on trying to get information out, we actually had a foundation give us money to send people to our website at Eagleton, and it said, don't give them a seat until you know where they stand. And anybody who wants to
Nicely put.
volunteer to do a sweatshirt with that set or t-shirt, I'd love to see it. I think we should talk about the assembly candidates, because Roy Fryman has been, I would say, a quiet member of the assembly, but a very diligent one. You can count on him to show up at committee meetings and take on some of the less flashy topics and so on. The Republicans are really not very well known. You will see that Traphagen is a council member in Clinton Township. And I think that there are a good number of people in the legislature who have got their first elected experience in municipal politics. Wouldn't you say that they sort of move up the ladder? And then we have the two women who are running. We don't know very much about Zhang, but Michelle Drulis is a very, I think you would consider her an experienced political person, having run in Tom Malinowski's district office for 4 years. But Jeannine, you were going to say something about the women who were running, and particularly the experience of Assemblywoman Jaffer, I think. Didn't you want to?
Yes,
weigh in?
I do. It was very, very disappointing to hear about her experience as an assemblywoman and how she felt that she spent 2 years pretty much defending herself on issues that had nothing to do with legislation. I mean, she felt that she was, it was almost like being bullied by people in the social media because of her background and that type thing. And she really didn't feel supported by the party either. So she felt that it really was best for her to just get out of politics and not stay in. And I think it's a loss for us.
Yeah,
I really do.
I
I
think
agree with you.
it was her religion that
It was her religion.
yeah, and to have that kind of representation in New Jersey, which is more and more diverse, was a real asset. And
I remember writing about her when she got elected. She was the first Muslim American woman elected a mayor in the United States, if I'm correct.
In the United
Montgomery
States, you're
Township.
absolutely
I mean,
right.
she was a trailblazer, and she gets to the legislature and she's just pounded on social media, and she's put in the back bench and put on the back of the line, you know, where of seniority. And I think she looked at it all and said, "Why, you know, why am I putting up with this?
Well,
For what?"
I think the party let her down. I mean,
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Ingrid, as you know, with my own experience
Yeah,
in being the first, I've been the first in a lot of areas,
yeah.
elected down in my hometown, down in Winslow Township, and different appointments.
Mhm.
And the one thing that I had, because I'm very vocal, I'm very opinionated, I had support at the top of the party. The party defended me. I mean, I'm short, I'm female, I'm Black.
Mhm.
And then they find out decades later I'm gay. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh my goodness, she has all these things that are on the spectrum. And I was supported. And I think it's sad that this assemblywoman just felt it was not worth it.
Mhm.
Continuing to be civically engaged, especially when we look at the current events going on right now. And
Absolutely.
here we are, that she felt that she just couldn't give anymore.
Right. I think that Michelle Drulis, who is running to, in effect, replace her, is a type of person that comes to this position with some background, and in effect knows some of the pitfalls of serving in the legislature, and I think there's some potential there if she gets elected to add to some talented women in the legislature. Jeannine, I know that you were involved, is it in the Women's Political Caucus, and in encouraging people to run, and then in endorsing people for this legislative session. How are we doing with women running? You had mentioned that in some cases women were resigning and weren't being replaced with women candidates.
Yeah, there are some districts, and I'll tell you, the district, well, as you know, I chair the Dan Benson for Mercer County Exec,
Mhm,
and his replacement, the candidate is a female.
mhm,
And not only is she a female, but she's a person of color, Tennille McCoy.
mhm,
So that's interesting. But up in North Jersey, I was telling you, in one of the Essex County districts, all of the legislators who will probably all be reelected and elected overwhelmingly, they're all female. The
uh-huh,
senator, the two assembly people, but we are going to lose down in South Jersey. We're going to lose a female down there. Gabby chose not to run, so I don't think we're going to pick up a
mhm,
seat down in that area.
mhm,
So um, we're losing some ground, and we've lost some big voices in the legislative caucus. I mean, Sandra Cunningham,
mhm.
she was very outspoken and involved in a lot of major issues as senator. Loretta Weinberg, we
Right.
lost her. Nia Gill,
Mhm,
that seat now goes to a male and on the Senate side. I
mhm,
mean, we have lost some
mhm.
very vocal female legislators.
Right, right. So since we said we would settle on the 16th legislative district and try to help voters, I think predominantly tuning in from Princeton, uh, I uh, I would encourage people to see if they can find out where people stand on issues. And Charlie, you've said how hard it is to find out about that. The only really campaign material that I've seen is a support for New Jersey's very progressive stand on abortion, and a concern about Democrats that the Republicans are elected, that would get weakened in some way. And in Senator Bucco, in being interviewed on Saturday night, I think, is he the campaign chair for the Republicans?
He's well, by dint of his position as Senate Minority Leader, they oversee the Senate Majority PAC or Minority PAC, which finances
Mhm,
races and fields candidates.
mhm,
So he has a big say over. He's part of the party's leadership on an
mhm.
overall direction.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that there, are a lot of concerns, but there's also a concern for the state as a whole. And you've written about this, Charlie,
Mm.
is that because of all the pandemic aid that New Jersey received, we had a budget that was larger than anybody could imagine.
Loaded. Right.
And for both parties, it appears next year, when that budget comes up, are going to have to make some hard choices, because there just isn't at this point as much income or revenue that is going into the budget. So whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're going to have to wrestle with that. And that election, it'll be a lame duck for the governor. And so I don't know how you describe that as a political issue. But I think if you're a person who is interested in what a candidate stands for, one of the best questions that is fair to ask of Democrats and Republicans is, what are you going to do about the budget that probably can't be as large as it was this year with this much money rolling out? Would you say that's a fair?
That's a very fair question. And I'll tell you what makes it even more urgent is the Stay New Jersey rebate, and the anchor rebate, which are the most
Anchor too.
generous rebate programs in state history. And not only did we get taxpayers get a check earlier in the year, but they accelerated the schedule so that we can get one in the weeks before the election. How convenient that is. But and they are talking about, they mean the Democratic leadership in the legislature, of making this a permanent program. And not only that, but the anchor program will be part of this even more grandiose giveaway called Stay New Jersey, which is targeted towards seniors, and its overall ambition is to give senior property tax payers a 50% cut in their property taxes. It won't be launched in theory until 2026. They still have to work out the system, how this is all going to be calculated and distributed and administered. A lot of us have written, including me, that I don't think anybody's ever going to see a dime of relief from Stay New Jersey. I think this is a phantom program that's been ginned up as an election year slogan and a promise. But I think the cost of that going forward is going to be enormous. And so once that pandemic money vanishes completely, I mean, it's going to be a sort of a slow decline. But so how do you justify and how do you expect to pay for that alone, that particular piece of it alone? Do you think it's real? Do you think are we really fooling seniors going forward? Should we be more honest about what the future holds? Fair questions.
Yeah, and not only fair questions for this year's election, but because a lot of those payments, we will not see them in 2026. The folks who are running for governor in 2025 are going to have to respond to this.
Right.
You know,
it's an issue
it's
right
going
there.
to be fascinating. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there are pressures on both sides to either give less money to schools in general, or to shift support from the more urban schools that really have been improving to suburban schools where there truly are some real needs as our population changes. And you put that together with what I think every legislative candidate has been saying, is that they didn't think the legislature was involved enough, both publicly and behind the closed doors, in shaping the budget, that the governor did too much of that on his own. So it's sort of interesting to see if the legislature could even get its act together, whether you're Republican or Democrat, to play that kind of role. Because it's really hard to decide who to give more to and who to give less to.
Right.
And Ingrid, you know, being a former NJEA lobbyist for 10 years, you know, we've walked down that road before. About how do you make that decision with the funding of schools. So that's going to be fascinating.
Right. So for people who are wondering about who to vote for the legislature, or what the legislature does, if you could ever find a candidate to ask that person, you know, what are you going to do when you get there? Sort of pinning them down on where they stand, on where they think the money in the budget should go. I mean, we know that all the money that is collected from the income tax is supposed to go back to education at the local level, to lower property taxes. And that hasn't quite been obvious, but it should be something that, if we had debates, should be debated. Wouldn't you think so?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And especially in light of, and we've written about this too, this was probably the greatest opportunity we've had in more than a decade, maybe even beyond. We had enormous resources at our disposal to fix chronic problems in this state, whether it be New Jersey Transit, bring up school funding to full funding, to full levels, fix the unemployment insurance program, motor vehicles, you name it. There was a long list of really festering problems that were exposed by the pandemic, and that sort of the rotting timbers of government were just unveiled for us, and we did nothing really to address that. And that would be a question about what would be your priority. You lived through the pandemic. You know, should we, for example, candidate A, be putting another $3 billion into rebates, or should we be, you know, taking care of our social infrastructure? Where should that money go?
But you know what we are seeing right now, and Charlie, you would probably be one of the first persons to say, yes, you're right. We are now living in an environment where the covers are not pulled off anymore because of the lack of reporters.
Oh.
I mean, see, these questions that you're raising, I remember the day, I mean, you and I, we've been in this business now. I've been walking the halls of the legislature since the late 70s. And the worst thing in the world for legislators, especially during election time, is having a bunch of reporters walking behind them saying, what do you think about this? Tell me why you voted on here. They don't have that anymore. They don't have to
No.
worry about it. So now we're living in an environment where everything is being done through social media. People are just making up their own facts. It's amazing to me. And so folks won't know the real positions on major issues.
Even if you did, it's where are they going to read it? That's the other depressing.
Where are they going to read it?
You keep this up, Jeannine. I'm by my window. You know, I don't want to jump out, but you're going to depress me.
Hey, look,
It's
I
locked.
was an English major. I thought I was going to be a big time New York Times editor or something when I was in school. That's why I majored in English. Ended up being a high school English teacher.
Right.
I'll say this. I mean, there is still really good work being done. It just doesn't, and some of the younger reporters that are coming up, I just feel are really whip smart and committed, and just as committed to the enterprise as a lot of us post Watergate groomed or generation. I do feel confidence in the personnel that are out there. It's just how people consume their news and whether there's going to be enough jobs for them is really the real problem. But you're 100% right. There used to be swarms of reporters down on press row. Somebody just sent me, for example, an old press contact list from the late 90s. And it was just, there were so many names on there and they were all together in that hive on the second floor of the State House. And you know what? We were a legitimate presence. Collectively, it was, you could almost feel the tension between the other side of the building, which was a legislature, and us, and across the hall was a governor's office. And there was that vigilance that just, and intimacy that just is vanished. It's gone.
I think also, as we looked at those faces of the 16th legislative district, and think that, you know, in any other part of New Jersey, people could be doing the same thing in their libraries and have a different set of faces and get to know who these people are. We don't know in a visual society like television or social media on Facebook what they look like, and we don't really hear from them in stories that are written about them. But I think there really was a time that if you ask each one of the 6 people that we were looking at, and that people are going to have to choose who they're going to vote for, legislators were known for having special interests. You knew where to go for people who had some expertise.
That's very true.
And I think of, that Frank Pallone, who is now a congressman and is the highest ranking person on the health issues, he knew a lot about what was going on with support for healthcare and hospital stuff and so on. and if you wanted to know something, you went to him. I mean, one of the people that I think of that is sort of in that category is Troy Singleton from down near Burlington and so on.
Right.
That I think I think Zwicker is probably also in that category, that he
Right.
knows that you can go to him if you're concerned about climate change and so on.
Or
But
Joe Vitale on health and
on health,
public
yes,
policy
yeah.
in
And I
Middlesex
want to
County.
say something on, I want to say something else on Andrew Zwicker,
Okay.
that I find amazing about him. He doesn't live for elections.
Mhm.
You could tell that Zwicker, it's not just about politics for him. And he is willing to vote on the tough issues according to how he feels the issues should be met. I mean, you don't get party bosses in a room. And as we know, party bosses do. They start making the phone calls to their legislators saying, you know, we need you on this. Zwicker really does sit down. He wants to know the issues. When it came to Reproductive Freedom Act, that was a tough vote.
Mhm.
I mean, there was a whole lot in that bill.
Right.
And he just felt that women should have the right to choose.
Mhm.
And I am amazed at that man. I mean, he's a
Very thoughtful.
unique human being.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
he does take on thorny issues like public access to public records, expanding access or ensuring access to public records, stuff that you're not going to get a lot of electoral mileage out of.
yeah, I think he also
Right.
was involved in getting early voting and dealing with those kinds of voting issues. And it's a shame that we can't have a conversation with Michael Pappas, because he's had some interesting experiences and is known for singing in Congress. But he knows local government really well. He
Yes.
was on the Somerset County Board of Freeholders for a long time, and Somerset County has
That's
a very good reputation of being well managed and
Right.
preserving open space and so on. And so not being able to get up close with a person like that, he's missing something. And I think we're missing.
Well, I think one of the reasons why they're avoiding debates and avoiding this kind of analysis is that especially in a low turnout election, it's just how much of your base can you really get out?
Mhm.
It's just getting your targeted voters out and making sure they show up. I think, appealing to people in the middle is great, and you're going to need some people who are not generally less partisan than your base, but they're not by and large, they don't show up for primary. So their attitude is get your people out, see if you can depress the other side a little bit, their base, but get your people out. And so why debate and try to attract people who are less partisan? Because they're not going to come out.
Right. I want to ask you about what appears to be something that is making this election maybe less predictable than it might be. And that is all of the attention over the last maybe 2 years that's been paid to what school boards do.
Right.
And a lot of people that have been predicting what this election might be like are saying that people might have gone out to vote for the school board if they got a phone call, if it was a local, group of people who were really saying, I want so-and-so to be invited, to be elected. But it wasn't party based.
That's right.
And the turmoil about books and parents' rights and all of those things that really should be understood why we have rules about them is now generating an interest in this election that you didn't have in school board elections, and people are likely to show up for school elections that didn't show up, and will also now be voting for legislative candidates. So it's a
Right.
kind of unknown quantity.
Totally correct.
You really should not be estimating, who's going to really vote for who and so on, but we do that.
I think it.
And so there's an element of electorate that is unknown. Maybe people will still only go and vote for the school board candidates that they want and skip everybody else. I mean, that has happened. If you look at the vote, you can see that.
Mhm.
But I think that that's one of the things that was discussed at this Friday night program with campaign chairs. Well, we think more people are going to show up because of their interest in the school board, which I guess you just have to say is turmoil that has been going on. What do you think about that? Jeanine, is that something that you as a school person think about, or Jeanine?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So it's not just the school board election, and this is the thing that's tricky. And I talked about this 2 years ago when I was on News 12. When we saw the returns coming in, I said, folks, you do see what's going on around the state. It is the Republican Party is now equating the issue of what parents should know, what books should be banned, all of that. That's becoming an issue where people are going to the polls and the literature is not voting for school board candidates. They're voting for issues, and they are assuming that the Republican Party candidates will be better, will better serve them because they are protecting parents' rights.
Right.
And I was wondering 2 years ago, when are people going to see how school issues are now moving over into the lane of legislative races? And now when you look in Monmouth County, and there are some other districts as well, these are the issues that will probably make some of these races, like Ben Gopal's race, making them very, very competitive. Because Republicans now feel if they come out and they vote for the Republican candidate, it means parents will still have the choice of what goes on with their children.
That's so right. And it's also here in the 16th district in Montgomery Township, for example. That school board is aflame with this issue. And it has been for much of the year. And I'm preparing a column this week that on two fronts, how both parties are going to rue the day they took significant action on two different things. One of them was in 2020, the Republicans trashed the notion of early voting, and that was led by Donald Trump, and it has haunted the party ever since. And they're going to rue the day they ever, and they're scrambling to catch up to that. And I think that on the Democratic side, it's going to be, they're going to rue the day that they move school board elections to legislative to November, because look,
to November, exactly.
What Jeannine just put a finger on is, and Ingrid, is the school board election now is going to be a grassroots bottom-up engine of turnout. How much? No one really knows. No polls are going to be able to adequately measure it, nor do they are able to measure how much pushback is out there in the communities, meaning people who are not all amped up over parental rights and actually are frightened by some of the rhetoric coming from the right and are pushing back in townships like Montgomery. But no one really knows. And now this is going to be a real wild card. And that is why you see the Democrats here, especially here in the 16th, and as well as elsewhere, are pushing back on abortion. They see that issue as a countervailing one that can offset all this emotional turmoil over parental rights. They see that one driving out the base, For the Republicans,
Mhm.
abortion could play the same role on the Democratic base. And maybe some the people in the middle that do jump in that smaller number, being disgusted or afraid of what the Republicans might bring. And again, that might offset the
Okay.
opposite effect that parental rights
Charlie,
have.
I'm going to stop it here because we promised we would answer questions. Kim, do you have some to give to the panel?
Yes, there are a couple of questions. One is probably a quick one. How does New Jersey voter turnout compare to other states? 27% seems low, but they're curious about how it compares.
I don't have a state by state one on that one, so that's tricky. I don't know if Jeannine does, whether she's done that. I've just, it's been hard enough trying to get the history of this one.
Let me guess.
No.
We do elections in odd years after the federal election. And there's nothing in the atmosphere. Nobody's really talking about going to vote the way they do when we vote for Senate or president. And it's going on all over the country. We're out there alone with Virginia and so on. And I think it has an awful lot to do with we just forget that there's an election day. Or what are we doing voting now? Nobody else is voting now. I think that's a very big factor. And also, the reason we're having the program is that people don't know who the candidates are, and they're confused about who they're supposed to vote for and where they fit into the picture. So I think that's it's not just voters not doing their duty. It's just that it's hard to do your duty in that kind of an atmosphere.
Right,
Is that okay?
Excellent response, actually.
All right. So what else?
Do the legislative leadership teams have too much power? ? It seems that the individual legislators have little power to influence matters, including the budget.
Okay.
I would agree. I definitely believe that to be true. I mean, there's so much money amassed in these leadership war chests, and they have so much power over the Democratic Party apparatus that it's hard to buck them, really. You basically have to take your marching orders from the leadership, and that is only going to intensify with these latest reforms earlier this year, where the contribution levels were dramatically increased, and they created this Orwellian account, the named account called housekeeping fund, which basically is used for like administrative purposes, which were paid for by the normal fund anyway, but now they created a separate one for housekeeping, which dramatically increases the amount of money that the leadership can now amass. So yes, I definitely think there's too much consolidated power in the leadership.
What do you think, Jeannine?
Well, first of all, disclaimer, I am a registered lobbyist. So I do have to deal.
That's why you're here.
With,
you know everything.
I have to deal with leadership all the time. So I won't say that they have too much power, but I will say I just think it's so insightful of the questioner. When I was looking at the questions and I saw that question about 15 minutes ago, and I'm like, oh boy, I hope I don't get that one. They have a lot of power. And I remember, and I'm sure Ingrid, you and Charlie remember, the year that it changed. It used to be there was no leadership pact.
Mhm.
So every
That's right.
legislator was on his or her own.
Right.
And I remember at the time I was with NJEA as a lobbyist.
1993.
And we were, 1993. And then all of a sudden we're looking at, oh my goodness, it's the leadership pact. Now it's the majority leader. It's the Speaker of the Assembly. It's the Senate President. So the person who asked the question, it is true. The power of individual legislators has been diminished somewhat, but I still believe in the power of advocacy. I really do. And I think that groups who who are passionate about their issues, they get to the rank and file legislators so that those people will push their leadership. It does work. It does work, but leadership has a lot of power, a lot of power.
They do have a lot of power, but I think also the legislators have to have to let them know that you do that and I'm done for. And don't you want me here? And don't you want this seat? So it's
Exactly.
a kind of,
Exactly.
balance. Sometimes it shifts and so on, but I do think that it's worth, calling attention to the amount of money that's now out there. And that
It's a lot.
in addition to counties, you can give the most money to a county campaign or county PAC of any of them. And you don't know anything about counties to begin with. And so then they get the most money. I mean, it's quite amazing.
Well, and there's nothing to stop them. In fact, they often do wheel it to other county PACs on behalf of somebody else. So it's sort of, they're like transfer stations of money for wherever the party wants it to go. That used to happen all the time in Bergen County under the leadership of Joe Ferriero. You'd see all this money being poured in from South Jersey and Middlesex County, and donors from that had no, they're from all over the place.
Right.
And it was a statewide party. It was a party decision for whatever was the imperative at the time.
Kim, do we have any
Well, look,
other questions? Wait, let's just
wait.
we have to close down a little bit. Are there any other questions?
Okay.
Most of them are about journalism and the impacts of
press.
journalism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. We promise another one of these, okay, on journalism, and we'll get more journalists together.
I'll take some antidepressants before we do that one.
and I'll be in front of my laptop and not in my car on my way
I know.
home.
I know. You look like I'm going to see you out in a delivery truck out front in a few minutes.
I know, right? And I'm a podcaster.
Yeah. I hope, did you have to pay any tolls today? I was really surprised how quickly Murphy's increasing the tolls.
They pulled that back real
Changed
fast, right?
Oh yeah.
Changed it overnight. That was really
All it takes is a vetoing of the minutes.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, Kim, anything else? I think maybe we'll say, please go and vote, and we hope that this discussion may have given you some ideas about whose candidacy you should give some more thought to, and that it's not quite as confusing, that yes, you are in the 16th district, and just remember that number. You've joined a lot of other towns up in Hunterdon and Somerset, but it really only means you show up to vote for the legislative candidates in District 16, as well as your county and your local candidates. So thanks for joining in, and we hope you will have a good election day and go and vote. You can go vote early. You can go tomorrow morning if you want to and vote. But just vote, okay? Don't forget.
Or get those vote by mail ballots in.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you to Charlie and to Jeannine for
Thank you.
making this a lively discussion.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you to Kim and everybody at the library for putting it together. That's just great.
Thanks
you
for
so much.
having us.
Thank
Okay,
you
Have a
all.
good night.
wear your
Okay.
button. I voted, okay?
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks.